Hey guys, today's video is about the tent I'll be taking on my thru hike of the Pacific Crest Trail starting in just a couple months. It's the Tarptent Stratospire Li. To be clear, this isn't exactly a review of the tent. I've only spent about 10 nights in it so far, and I haven't had the chance to test it out in extreme rain or wind or snow. This is really just me trying to get to know the tent some. When I first purchased the tent, one of the things that attracted me to it were the options for modular setups, so you can set it up either as just a tarp or just the inner mesh body. But since getting it, I haven't done that at all. I've really just been using it as a tent. So I wanted to see what it would take to make those two options happen, and I thought I might as well share it in a video. So let's start with a quick look at the basic specs and features. The Tarptent Stratospire Li is a two-person, double-wall, non-freestanding or trekking pole tent made of Dyneema. It has two side entry doors and two very large vestibules. It sets up with 6 to 8 stakes and 2 trekking poles handle side down. You can choose to purchase with a full mesh interior like I have or a solid interior. Purchase includes the tarp or fly, the interior of your choice, a Dyneema stuff sack, and 6 6-inch aluminum stakes with a stake sack. It comes fully taped and sealed. The interior height of the tent is 45 inches, the width is also 45 inches, and the length is 86 inches. Other features include pitch-lock corners, a bathtub floor, reflective guy lines, 2 internal mesh pockets for stashing small items, and 2 ceiling hooks, which I sometimes use to rig up a clothesline. Additional options for the tent include sidecar sleeping compartments for pets or children that can fit inside either vestibule, adapters for your trekking pole handles that allow you to set up with the tip down and the handle up, optional 8-ounce pole setup if you're not using trekking poles, and of course the option to set up the fly or internal body independently. You could also switch between the mesh and solid interiors if you had both. The fly weighs in at 15.5 ounces, the solid interior weighs 11.6 ounces, and the mesh interior weighs 12 ounces. The stuff sack and stakes add an additional 2 ounces. So the full weight for the tent with the mesh interior is 29.1 ounces. The tent's packed size is 16 inches by 5 inches. Tarptent recommends rolling, not stuffing the tent, but if you remove the poles and the pitch-lock corners, you could stuff it. I tried both ways, and after some practice, I found it's easier for me to just leave the pitch-lock corners alone and roll the tent. I also worry less about damaging the tent this way. I just carry it attached to the outside of my pack. I also carry 2 additional tent stakes for a total of 8. I like having at least 1 extra, and I feel like having 8 allows for a more bomber-proof setup when needed or when setting up in a less than ideal spot. A ground sheet is optional for the tent depending on the terrain and your comfort level with not having one. So far, I've been fine without one, and I'm not planning to carry one on the PCT this year. Tarptent has a video tutorial for setting up the tent. I'll put a link to that video in the description of this video below. I've tried a couple different things, but I found that following their instructions does make for the easiest setup. Your trekking poles should be set to 122 centimeters. Start by staking out the vestibule on one side where the zipper is. Then move to the left and stake out that corner. Next, place your trekking pole handle side down between the 2 corners you've just staked out. The tip of your trekking pole will fit into a grommet at that top corner. Make sure here to get your trekking pole nice and straight. Most of the time when I've had issues with setting up the tent, it's because I found later my trekking poles were crooked. Then move to the other side. You're going to place your trekking pole first, then stake out the corners on either side. One thing I found that helps is to place my stakes in the corner loops and leave them laying on the ground before placing my poles. This makes it a little easier to hold and balance the pole while you push in your stakes. Here again, I first stake out the corner with the vestibule zipper, then move to the left and stake out that corner. Finally, stake out your pitch lock corners. After that, you can go around and tighten each corner. Be sure when you stake out the tent that you leave enough slack in the lines for adjusting here at the end. Now let's look at the modular setups. Separating the fly from the inner body is pretty easy. The four corners of the tent interior need to each be unclipped in two places. The top connection is to the fly itself and the lower connections are to the stake lines. All that's left then is unclipping the two top corners next to the trekking poles. Of course, you could also detach the interior without the tent already being set up. If you were setting up the tarp independently, you would do it exactly the same as when you're setting up the full tent. Without the interior, the space inside the tarp feels huge. Setting up the interior independently is a little more tricky. It also requires some extra cord. I've not been able to find instructions for this from Tarptent. All I've found is a picture of this setup on their website. It's hard to tell exactly what they've done in that picture, but it looks like the stakes go straight into the clips. But when I did that myself, it didn't seem like it was good for the clips. The stakes do fit, but I'm afraid that prolonged tension would loosen the clips. Making an extension for the stake with short pieces of cord seemed like a better idea. I did that for all four corners. For the top corners supported by the trekking poles, I placed a cord loop just above the base of my trekking pole tips, and I clipped the interior corner to the loop as shown here. I found it worked a little better to set my trekking poles to 125 centimeters for this. For the pitch lock corners, I found it didn't work well to clip the top connection directly to the stake loop. Instead, I was able to get a much better pitch by staking the top corner farther out like this. For the other two corners, it worked well enough for me to clip the top connection to the stake loops. So for this setup, I used 4 9-inch pieces of cord for staking out the four corners, 2 63-inch pieces of cord for staking out the top corners supported by the trekking poles, and 2 30-inch pieces of cord for staking out the top connections of the pitch lock corners. I used a total of 8 stakes, 4 for each bottom corner, 2 for the top corners, and 2 more for extending the top of the pitch lock corners for a better pitch. When setting up the interior independently, I first staked out the 4 bottom corners, then placed my trekking poles to support the 2 top corners, then staked out the 2 pitch lock corners. Well, that's about it. So far, I'm really enjoying my Tarptent Stratospire Li, and I think it will be a great shelter for my upcoming thru hike of the Pacific Crest Trail. I hope some might find this video helpful. Also, if you have this tent and have tips and tricks of your own, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. Thank you guys for watching.